Did the Denver Broncos win the first wave of NFL free agency? Which roster hole remaining is the biggest need to address for the law firm of Payton and Payton over at Broncos Park, powered by Common Spirit? And we have another special guest on the tail end of today's show for a very memorable and somewhat triggering mile-high milestone celebrating 30 years of DenverSports 104.3 The Fan. All things to come on today's rundown, but we begin in the NFL, where the San Francisco 49ers, who get their namesake from the panhandling pioneers of the American West, may have allowed the Denver Broncos to strike gold with a couple of free agent additions. It came down the wire yesterday that first the Broncos signed safety Talanoa Hufanga to a multi-year deal, averaging at about $15 million a year, and then doubling down on the 49er to Denver connection by bringing in linebacker Greenlaw. This is an immediate upgrade for two starting positions on the Broncos defense and two holes that they definitely needed to address, albeit at some level of priority this offseason. Talanoa Hufanga and Greenlaw both have similar storylines in terms of their arcs as a player, and they both boil down to this. The Broncos, with Sean Payton and George Payton, are taking a gamble on star level, even elite level players who have some troublesome injury history already in their young NFL careers. They are taking a chance on a player who, when healthy, is one of or among the best in the league, and betting that they, in the Broncos, can take their high-quality training staff and prevent the same things that held the 49ers back and ultimately led to their decision to release them from happening here in Denver. Now, if you look at the in-house signings that you want to bundle in with free agency as it relates to players who will continue to be with the roster, we already saw that they inked DJ Jones, another former 49er, by the way, to a 3-year deal. Jarrett Stidham solidifies himself as the backup quarterback to Bo Nix once again, keeping some continuity in the quarterback room. Long snapper Mitchell Fraboni, that feels like one of those positions that's not very sexy when it comes across your timeline, but it feels also like one of those things where you don't know there's a problem until you have one at that position. So totally fine with that in one of the more unique positions in the NFL. And I mentioned it yesterday, signing back offensive lineman and kind of swing tackle for the Broncos, Matt Pert, to a 2-year deal worth about $7 million. Something that, again, like long snapper, you don't realize how thin you are or how troublesome depth can be at a position like offensive tackle until you have it. And we've seen the Broncos go down that route. As it relates to the two 49ers who will now be wearing orange and blue starting this upcoming season, I think this was a slam dunk home run first day for the Denver Broncos, who I wasn't sure were even going to be very active on the opening day of the legal tampering period and the unofficial start of free agency. But I think this is a clear sign from Sean Payton, George Payton, and the like, that the Broncos understand what they achieved in the first season with Bo Nix and how differently that changes the trajectory of a rebuild. Typically, teams that are rebuilding are not insanely active in free agency. They are taking a slower approach to build depth and build a young core around usually a rookie quarterback. In this case, not so much. Both the Denver Broncos and their NFC counterpart, who's in the same boat, the Washington Commanders, have proven to be two of the more active teams in free agency. And I think you could make a genuine argument, considering that the Broncos entered this offseason with one of the top-ranked defenses in the league, especially if you discount the drop-off that the Broncos defense had at the start of December of last season when things really started to slide. The Broncos had a top 5 defense, top 3 in some categories leading into the month of December of last season. And the reasons why they fell off after that point was because they, A, had injury and depth on defense, especially in the secondary and the linebacker unit, that they couldn't overcome when it came to playing talented quarterbacks like Joe Burrow. And B, they lacked a physical identity in the run game, especially, that prevented them from getting off the field, as we saw most painfully in the wild card round against Buffalo, where the Broncos defense just felt like no matter what they did, Buffalo just kept marching on, and they didn't really have to be put into difficult situations. Well, in Talanoa Hufanga, a guy who's a all-pro level player, first-team all-pro level player in 2022 before getting injured in each of the last 2 seasons, once with an ACL tear and another with a ligament wrist injury that required surgery. But Talanoa Hufanga was playing at an all-pro level and then has played 17 games in the last 2 seasons for those various reasons. So when healthy, Talanoa Hufanga is one of the best safeties in the NFL, pairing him alongside a Brandon Jones, who also was a free agent addition last year for the Broncos and performed pretty admirably in that role with the departure of Justin Simmons. So you look at, in terms of a safety tandem, a safety duo, the Broncos have a strong candidate on the preseason on paper list to be one of the better duos in the league. And at the inside linebacker position, we have been pining and whining and kind of looking away at that position and their inability to cover, especially tight ends in the middle of the field, but also create a physical run presence since Danny Trevathan walked out those doors to head to Chicago all those years ago. I think we have one of, if not the best chance since Danny Trevathan's departure to reestablish that spark and that identity. Dre Greenlaw is somebody that I promise you, if you ask any San Francisco 49ers fan around the country how they feel about Dre Greenlaw departing for San Francisco and heading to Denver, it is not a positive feeling. This is a guy who, if not for injuring his Achilles while coming onto the field, could have led the 49ers defense to a Super Bowl. It was staggeringly noticeable, the difference in the San Francisco 49ers middle part of their defense and how they not only guarded Travis Kelce, but attacked the run game as well with Dre Greenlaw's absence compared to when he's there. So again, you cannot overstate the injury component to this as it relates to both of those players, but we've seen Sean Payton be overly confident about his ability to evaluate him and George Payton, I should say, ability to draft and evaluate talent coming out of college. The infamous quote of, "We think we are better at this than just about everybody else, and we feel fortunate in that regard." Well, we saw some early returns on that. Devon Bailey is a 7th-round pick, seeming to look pretty good. George Payton's draft picks from the last handful of years are ascending at a much higher rate, especially now that they have more stability at the quarterback position. And Sean Payton has spoken highly of his training staff and their ability to take the Broncos from one of the most oft-injured teams in the league to one of the least oft-injured teams in a very quick span of only a year or two. So I think that for the Denver Broncos, this is something that could turn out to be an amazingly successful gamble. And if they hit pay dirt on this, the Broncos are going to be a force to be reckoned with on defense. Now, we've talked about the additions. As it relates to the subtractions for the Denver Broncos, which is the other side of the coin when it relates to free agency, they've had a handful across all 3 phases of the ball, and because of their additions on defense, it still leaves some holes on offense that need to be filled, as well as special teams. We saw quarterback Zach Wilson earn a 1-year deal with the Miami Dolphins, which, as a side note, if you're just talking about opportunity for a player and fit with a team with a need, I think this could be a sneaky great signing for the Miami Dolphins and for Zach Wilson, who thinks he still has some gas left in the tank and is looking for an opportunity to play. Tua Tagovailoa, when healthy with the Miami Dolphins under Mike McDaniel, have proven to be a team in the AFC that, even if they're not perennial AFC championship contenders, they're a team that can line up and score against anybody in the NFL when things are clicking on all cylinders. But just like we talk about the issues with Talanoa Hufanga and Dre Greenlaw as relates to injuries, concussions for Tua Tagovailoa have kept that as a kind of wishy-washy situation. So for Zach Wilson, I think that's great. Javonte Williams, who we all expected was not going to be back among the Broncos running back rooms. It was just an abysmal collective performance, and Javonte was the figurehead starter in that room. He departs to the Dallas Cowboys on a 1-year deal worth about $3 million, and will hopefully get a rejuvenation of his career or seek an opportunity for one there. Does create an interesting situation because we know the Broncos have a need at running back that they thus far have not addressed in free agency, but will likely address in some fashion in the draft, maybe even in the first round. But there is a free agent running back for the Dallas Cowboys who's still floating out there in Rico Dowdle, who proved to be a spot-worthy player at times throughout the season. So you could see maybe a potential Dallas to Denver swap at running back. I think that could be an intriguing option that you could maybe pair on the back end with a mid-round draft pick at running back to rebuild your room that clearly needs some upgrades. We saw earlier today the punter Riley Dixon is heading to Tampa Bay, gets an opportunity for a fresh start there. And this is one that gives me pause, and one that I'm going to bring up in slight fashion with our upcoming Mile High Milestones guest coming up. But I think that when you, again, look at, just like long snapper, when you look at punter as a position where a team makes a change, not the sexiest or most eyebrow-raising, eyeball-grabbing move, but I promise, if the Broncos, or when a team in general makes a move on special teams at punter, at kicker, whatever, and that performance or that production at that position takes a step backwards, it starts to feel really noticeable, and it starts to come across as one of those moves of like, did you really have to move on from a guy who was doing admirable and doing okay? And we'll see how it relates to the Broncos and where they go with that. Riley Dixon was serviceable, not elite at that position, but could be a situation where we're hurting ourselves. We also saw Tremon Smith go to the Houston Texans, go back to the Houston Texans, I should say, and is now one of the highest paid special teamers in the league. We'll see if that makes a difference for the Broncos and it relates to their unit. They'll have new coordinators and kind of a new group in the fold there, but a depth loss there for the Broncos that I'm sure that they will look to address in the upcoming draft. And then finally, Cody Barton, one of the starting inside linebackers at last season, who was shuffled into the mix after the departure of Alex Singleton due to injury and all of the associated moves that had to go there. Dre Greenlaw filling that hole immediately provides an upgrade that I don't think we will be worried about the loss of Cody Barton in that regard. So before we bring in our Mile High Milestones guests, I do want to take a peek at the projected new starting defense for the Denver Broncos. You have the cornerback duo of Pat Surtain and Riley Moss, the reigning defensive player of the year, and then a young corner who is on the ascension at a very quick rate. And in the early part of the season before his injury, they looked like maybe one of, if not the best cornerback duos in the league. Your new safety tandem in Brandon Jones and Talanoa Hufanga, inside linebacker with Alex Singleton coming off of his return from injury, and Dre Greenlaw. The outside linebackers with Jonathan Cooper and Nick Benito, and then your front there with JFM, who's under contract for one more year, Zach Allen and DJ Jones. If you're asking me, again, on paper, in the preseason on paper edition, this does not look like a defense with a lot of holes. And obviously our thoughts and opinions will change as it relates to the performance as they start to get going. But man, that is a stout front for Denver to be able to help put some pressure on opposing offenses and make things a little bit easier for Bo Nix going into his second season. All right, it is time for our Mile High Milestone of the day, presented by your local Ford dealers. We've been counting down the top 30 storylines in Colorado sports over the last 30 years in celebration of 30 years of Denver Sports 104.3 The Fan. We land at number 24 on the countdown, and this is another one of those milestone memories that probably leaves a little bit of PTSD or some negative feelings in Broncos country, and that is the enigma that was Hurricane Josh McDaniels and his brief but robust tenure as head coach of the Denver Broncos. And our guest today to help us take this walk down memory lane is none other than Broncos running back Knowshon Moreno, who was a draft pick of the aforementioned Josh McDaniels and spent some time during that tumultuous run. Knowshon, so great to talk to you, my friend. How you doing?
Hey, good to see you, Richie, man. Everything's going well. Appreciate you having me, man.
Of course. Excited. Listen, who better to talk to about what was exactly going on with the team and in the locker room and how it felt that year where we saw one of the biggest switch-ups from a Denver Broncos team in recent memory. So, Knowshon, why don't we start with kind of the early process of your, what I would assume would be your interactions with Josh McDaniels as it relates to the combine, the draft, and kind of all of that process leading up to it. What do you remember most about that time and connecting with the Denver Broncos and specifically interacting with Josh in the draft process?
Yeah, man, it was a crazy time. Coming out of college and, going through the whole draft process, going to the combine and the guys coming to work you out and things of that nature. It was a lot going on about that time. But, when I got the call from Josh, it was a relief, man. It was definitely an honor to be able to, get drafted by any team and then to come to the Denver Broncos with their rich history. It was great. I loved it. And as far as, Josh, I see anything different. Honestly, I didn't see anything really bad about Josh. You got to think about it. I come out of college though, right? And we know the structure. We had a tight structure at Georgia. You know what I mean? So coming to the league and then coming into the locker room where looking back on it, everyone was saying it was kind of tight. Where he brings all these Patriot rules. He kind of brings that Patriot attitude, right? And but for me, and giving me this opportunity to play for the Broncos, I didn't see anything wrong, man. I like the structure.
Mm-hmm.
Looking back on it, it was kind of ridiculous. Like, no cell phones in the training room. It's like, oh, I don't see why, but okay. And it was just something that I felt like for me, it was nothing different. It was just, okay, this is what the league is like. And I got to adapt to it. And I'm out here to do a job and to play this game and see how I can help this team. But looking back on it, was like, dang, it was a lot going on. But you look at our team, man, we start 6-0 before going into that bye week. You can say what you want about it, but I thought everything was going good at that time. And then we come off that bye week. I don't know what flipped. I really don't know what flipped, man. But we win 2 games out of the last, I don't know how many, to go 8-8. Definitely a letdown, but the start of the season was all good for me, for everyone. We thought we were going places, but we saw what happened with that. But I guess Josh just did have a lot to learn, and then he goes to the Raiders and the same thing, right? But I always thought Josh was he stuck after his players. He stuck up for me. Stuck up for a lot of his players. He was a real smart guy. It wasn't like we ever went to a game that we weren't prepared, especially on the offensive side. I guess it was just other things that he had to kind of get over, and those hurdles he had to get over.
When you look at Josh McDaniels, we talk about Sean McVay and Matt LaFleur and Mike McDaniel and kind of the wonderkind young NFL head coach who's got an offensive mind, comes from a good system, and takes the league by storm. Well, Josh McDaniels was the wonderkind before the wonderkind. I mean, he came to the Broncos coming off of a season where he helped the Patriots after losing Tom Brady in week 1 with Matt Castle. He turned Matt Castle into an NFL starting quarterback, a guy who had never started in college, was a successful above 500 quarterback in the NFL. And so all of that momentum coming into Denver, you mentioned it, they start 6-0, and you would know more than us on the outside, us simpletons, about what switched and what changed. But the joking reference that we like to make, and I mentioned this, kind of subtly before you came on, was that you guys, Josh McDaniels, cut your punter, Brett Kern, after week 6, after the week 6 win. You guys were 6-0. Kern did not have a good game. I believe it was against the Chargers in week 6. And he makes a short-sighted decision, cuts Brett Kern, and then you guys back out the season 2-8, finish 8-8, and miss the playoffs. And so we like to jokingly refer to it as the curse of Brett Kern, who obviously went to Tennessee and was a staple with the Tennessee Titans for what felt like more than a decade. So we jokingly refer to it as that. But in all seriousness, what was the locker room vibe? And was there a switch up with Josh McDaniels and his demeanor and how he addressed the team, and maybe how you guys approach things week to week from the 6-0 start to the tailspin on the back end when things started to unravel? How was that working through that week to week?
Yeah, it seemed the same. But the closer we got towards the end of the season, where it was like, bro, all we got to do is win 1 or 2 games and we're good. We're in the playoffs in 2 games. I think towards the end of the season, it kind of got tight, where maybe people were trying too hard. Maybe the coaches was doing a little bit too much and things of that nature. But I think that the morale and everyone in the locker room was still like, bro, we're going to be all right. We're going to get there, bro. 2 games. We're good. There's nothing to worry about. But it just never really turned the corner. But I thought the guys I had too were good. Again, me being a young guy, still trying to learn the league, learn what this league is all about. I just kept my head down and was like, hey, I just got to do my job. If I do my job, then hopefully, everyone else could do theirs and we can be in a better place. But I think guys got tight. I think he got tight in there because, not guys, more so the coaches. It got kind of got tight with the coaches and yeah, we just couldn't get over that hump, man. That was crazy, man. Because right after the 6-0 start, we're like, bro, we're going to the playoffs, right off the rip. And
how could you not?
And I'm thinking to myself, like, bro, this is the league. It was not that bad, bro. This is not bad. We are okay. You know what I mean? But things didn't turn out too well, and there was a lot of things going on. But at the end of the day, when it comes to Josh, I still think that he's a smart guy. He was a good coach. You know what I mean? We just couldn't really get over the hump. So, but yeah, I just love to talk about Josh all the time. The Hurricane Josh, all those little comments. I love it though. But I've always thought Josh was a good guy and a good coach.
Something that I think signaled the official kind of end or the nail in the coffin on Josh McDaniels' tenure in Denver was the videotaping incident in London at Wembley Stadium, and he got fined $50,000. The Broncos got fined $50,000. It was obviously a lot more hype was centered around it because of the Spygate connections with the Patriots in the past, where they as an organization kind of got in trouble for the same thing. And, you know, you mentioned that the bringing over of the Patriot way and all that. And people are already making all those connections now that this happens with the Broncos. How far did that trickle down to you guys in the locker room that week? You guys are overseas, you're preparing to play a game and all that as a player, because obviously the news cycle has its fun with it. But was that like translating it all in the locker room? Was that something you guys were talking about or made aware of? Or what was that whole week and experience like leading up to that?
Yeah, really, especially for me. I mean, it really didn't get down to us like that. I mean, you heard it later on, you know, the buzz about it and what was going on. It was like, what? Josh was doing what? He's tripping. But no, honestly, it didn't get down to us. Not me. And I didn't hear any guys talking about it at the time either that I can remember. So I think that was a good job for us, just staying focused and like, bro, I don't know what they're talking about because you don't know what's going on. I mean, we don't know what the guys are doing up there. You know what I mean? In the front office and what they're doing when they're taping things and things of that nature. So for the guys, we just kept it simple. We just said, well, we got to go out there and win the game. It is what it is. But we did hear, you know, afterwards. But yeah, I mean, who knew what was going on? There was always something going on. It was always something going on, bro. But at the end of the day, you know, you look back, we didn't get the job done as players, you know, man. So that's all you can really say about that.
No, Sean, I think if you were to put out an unscientific poll among Broncos fans about a Mount Rushmore of Denver Broncos and maybe even Colorado sports villains, Josh McDaniels' bust would be on that Mount Rushmore. So in closing, and there's no wrong
crazy
answer,
though.
I was
Isn't
just
that crazy
say,
though?
There's no wrong answer to this question, but knowing that Broncos country vilifies Josh McDaniels in hindsight for his brief but memorable tenure here, what would your response be, or what would you say to the scores of Broncos fans who look back so negatively on Josh McDaniels here?
I mean, you can't. I mean, yeah, there were some things that happened. I mean, you think about the quarterback situation coming in with Cutler. You know, what I mean, you think about what's the name of Brandon Marshall. That whole saga that was going on with that. It was a lot going on, right? A lot of different personalities that Josh has to deal with and had to get under in the wraps. And he really didn't, you know what I mean? It kind of was just like, bro, I'm the boss and you do what I say kind of thing. And I get that, right? But you got to look at the good things. I thought his drafts were pretty solid, you know what I mean? You got Demaryius Thomas and some of these other guys in the later drafts, right? So, I mean, some Bronco greats that you can call greats, right? So he did some good things there. And maybe he just didn't have the time and he just burnt too many bridges. But I still think that he did some good things here for Denver. He brought that excitement here. And he just didn't fit for us here with the Broncos, you know what I mean? But I still think he did some good things. Like I said, I think his drafts were pretty good, you know what I mean? I thought his draft, what do you think about his drafts? I mean,
yeah,
his 2 drafts wasn't too bad.
No, you're right. Listen, I think that is, if you were asking me the question, and you obviously played for him, he drafted you, you had a much closer kind of insight on things and connection to it than I had. But if you were asking me, I would say that he was somebody who, when it comes to just being a football mind, excellent. He was an excellent offensive scheme guy, play caller. He understood how to coach in that role, which made him a fantastic, basically at almost every stint, coordinator. But there's a difference between being a coordinator and being a head coach, being a CEO versus being an upper level manager. And I think that he did not have the right personality type and the right interpersonal communication skill set to be able to manage all of that. And I think it's imploded at basically every stop that he's been to.
Right.
And the Broncos were just the first along that path, that hurricane path of destruction there. So
The hurricane path, I love it.
Yeah. So I don't know if we'll ever get an opportunity to have a potential fourth installment, with Josh McDaniels. But no, Sean, I thank you so much for joining us and bringing us that insight that only someone like you, who was in the locker room and was a prominent player involved with those discussions, especially on offense, that you could bring. So thank you so much for joining us, and I can't wait to catch up with you again soon. I'm sure we'll find some other milestone along the way here as we take a look into the past where we can ring you up again.
For sure. I appreciate you, man. Let's do it
Thank you
again.
so much. Thank you so much. To all the rest of you out there, have a great rest of your day, and we'll catch you at the same time, same place tomorrow.